session today with Min Huang. We're both from the University of Waterloo at the Student Success Office, and we are the Academic Development and Retention Specialists. For today, thank you everyone again for joining us in our session. You can do it, overcoming procrastination by prioritizing what matters to you. Our session is going to focus on some motivational strategies and maybe a little bit of time management strategies that you could use to help overcome some procrastinating behaviors. So as we mentioned, we welcome any chats or questions in the chat as we go through, and we can answer them as we go through the presentation. And we'll also have some time at the end for Q&A. So our session today is going to be broken down into 3 parts. The first part, we're going to be looking at what is academic procrastination and how this affects our performance. We're going to focus on, in part 2, some strategies to help us overcome these procrastinating behaviors. Again, looking at some motivational strategies to help us do that. And the last part, part 3, will be focusing on prioritizing your needs using something called a priority matrix to help us sort through all the tasks and again, build up that motivation to help us push through and, complete our tasks to the end. All right, so for now, we're going to pass it over to Min as we look into procrastination and how that prevents performance.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much, Catherine. And thank you so much for the introduction and welcome everyone to our session. So I'm going to go introduce our part 1, which is about like what procrastination is and how procrastination prevents performance. Okay, next slide. Okay, so I'm gonna give you 30 seconds for you to look at this image and also answer a question regarding this in terms of what's going on in this picture and what do you see. We're gonna use a Zoom poll to respond to this question. So I'm gonna launch the poll. So can you see the poll coming out?
Yeah, it looks
Yep,
good.
okay. Yep, great. Yeah, so if you have the answer, please respond in the poll so we can all see your answer to this question, what's going on in this picture. But if you like, you know what, you need a bit of more time to think about it, or if you like I don't have a very good understanding about this image for now, that's totally okay. So yeah, just wait another couple of seconds maybe to see if we receive any response from you. Okay, we got an answer for now. Catherine, can you see the responses to the question?
So far, looks like 3 people have answered the question so far.
Right.
Yeah, if we're ready to jump in, yeah, we could hit end poll and then we'll take a look at the answers. Yeah.
Okay. So if you feel like, yeah.
Okay.
All right, let's share the results. Can you see the answers now? I don't see answers from my side, unfortunately.
Okay, I could read it out. I'm sorry, folks, we thought it would come through. So it looks like someone's saying the cartoon is showing overwhelmed area on the graph. The motivation to work on a task plotted against quantity of work. The curve shows someone who is procrastinating, absolutely. And it shows the exponential increase of how motivated we are to work in relation to how much work we have on our plate. Yes, thank you, everyone. Yeah.
Thank you so much for answering the question. So, Catherine, you can help with stopping sharing or something. Like, I guess you have the overall control of the pool. Okay, thank you so much. So, I'm sure that you probably have already heard that either yourself or maybe your peers talking that it's the pressure motivates you to work, and also, like for example, the pressure from looming deadlines or the amount of work you have to do. So in this picture, we actually see that our motivation to work kind of increase in the beginning as we have a bit of more work to do. But actually the feeling of motivation eventually turns to be, panic and like eventually and also overwhelmed all of a sudden. So I feel like what it's during those type of feelings of being overwhelmed that we always feel like we probably need to procrastinate at some point. So I feel like the key for this image side, like using pressure as a motivator is like to start the work before we have too much work and become too overwhelmed, like until we get the point of feeling panic or even overwhelmed. So, and then today's workshop is going to take a deeper look at the connection between our motivation and also procrastinating behaviors. And hopefully you can have some takeaways, some strategies to help to overcome those procrastinating behaviors. Okay, next slide. We're gonna have another poll activity, which is like you're gonna choose from the three answers in terms of which of those scenarios do you relate to the most or you experience most often. So I'm gonna start with the poll for now, reflecting on, what is this one? Can you see the question now? No,
Not yet.
not yet. Okay. Let me take a look. Can you see it now?
Yeah, no.
Okay, awesome. So we have three answers, like kind of three options to this question, either difficulty planning or difficulty starting or difficulty like completing. So we see one response already, which is about like the starting phase. I was at, we see more responses coming in. Okay, that's great. So it seems like people are having a bit of more problem with either planning or starting, like as we can see from our responses. Okay, so that's great to know. All right. Hopefully you can see the answers from all of us. So you probably like don't have to label like to be like a procrastinator. Um, Yeah, like it's true. Like somebody feel like I probably have like a problem or challenges with all the stages. That actually is quite true with so many of the students as well. And so that in terms of this question, we always choose to, delay or deferring like a particular tasks or part of the task related to our academic life or our daily life. So this is known as situational procrastination. So our today's workshop again is going to focus on this perspective, which is like the situational perspective, like procrastination, and also how we can overcome this type of, procrastinating behavior. Okay, next slide. And very interestingly, we asked our students whether you experience procrastination, and some of our students give us a very direct response like, yes, we do procrastinate. For example, when it comes to like accumulated assignments and exams, it can be super difficult to figure out where to start. So as you can see, this is not just you, it's like it relates to many other students. And another student just responded that, yeah, this is usually on things that I have stress over. For example, a test that I have a lot to review, an assignment that's very long. So it's quite common to see that among our students. Next slide. So in the slide, we're going to talk about why procrastination undermines academic success. We're going to give you a brief, introduction or like kind of explanation of what procrastination is. So it is the act of delaying or putting off tasks until the last minute or they're like past their deadlines. And also academic procrastination. Obviously, it's the procrastination on academic tasks or, like either putting off or delaying the completing of those academic related tasks. And it is true that it occurs to all students it occurs to like students with, maybe all ages and particularly with higher education. And we do see that number, as shown on the slide, like about 70% of university students admit that they procrastinate according to like research studies. So in university, procrastination is like a quite commonly seen challenge. It has been reported like at such a high number. And we also figure out that the features of students who tend to procrastinate usually have the following signs, like they overestimate how much time they have left to perform the task, or they overestimate how motivated they will be in the future, or they underestimate how long certain activities will like take to complete. So that might be the reasons, like very common reasons why people might procrastinate on those academic tasks. And so you might use those reasons to also consider what are the reasons you procrastinate and also what caused you to like delay on your tasks. In this slide, we're going to briefly talk about like what are the features like or the common like four perspectives of what procrastination usually look like. So we're looking at those four categories or four perspectives, which are outcome satisfaction, preference for pressure, intentional decision, ability to meet deadlines. I'm going to give you like a more detailed explanation of each perspective. So the first one, outcome satisfaction. If you feel like you are not satisfied with the outcome, that means you're and also you're procrastinating. So that may be something you need to be concerned about. For example, my performance tends to suffer when I have to race against deadlines. So you don't feel you're not satisfied with the outcome at all. And the second, like you don't really enjoy the pressure of working towards deadline. For example, it's really painful for me to work under upcoming deadlines. And also, whether it's intentional decision, if it is you are not like doing something, you're doing something like, for example, if you're postponing your task unintentionally, that probably is procrastinating. And the last one, whether you can meet the deadline. So if I say like I often start things at the last minute and find it difficult to complete them on time, that's quite a signal of procrastination. And also on the other hand, we also say like somebody believe that they are like very productive procrastinator because they feel like I would love to work under the pressure and I put off some, one important task or like because I put off like completing one important task to complete the other more important tasks so that I'm prioritizing other things. This type of concept is not called our typical procrastination. It's actually a kind of active delay because active procrastinators are like academically confident yet delaying engagement, which is like a kind of learning strategy for some students. They intentionally postpone like starting the task, but are always able to meet the deadline and also are able to feel like satisfied with the eventual outcome. So that's the kind of, the active delay. So an example probably is like when someone postpones a task because they need to prioritize other important tasks or they need to wait until some more information coming in so that they can start working on the task more properly. So in this workshop again, we're gonna focus on this type of the passive and our typical procrastination and how you might want to overcome it. Yeah, and in this kind of little activity, I'm gonna go through all of those procrastination types. I'm gonna read through from 1 to 6, and you're gonna use like emoticon to show like whether you agree with that, so that you can identify which type of procrastinator you belong to. Okay, so the first type is you are overly concerned with not meeting high expectations. You work so hard, you never finish. Yeah, you can use any of the icons to represent that you agree with this type. So for the first one, yeah, we see it one thumb up. So for the first type, which is called perfectionist. So you're a perfectionist, also a procrastinator, probably. And for second type, you are great at planning and scheming, but frustrated by the practical reality of sitting down to do hard work. So if you agree with this one, give some icon or emoji. So this one is like, we call this type as dreamer. Okay. And then do we have any responses for this one? I guess not. Okay, so for the next one, we have what ifs get in the way. You avoid making decisions, resist change, and are fearful about unfamiliar. So for this type, we call this warrior. Again, no response. Okay, so we're gonna go keep looking at the following three types. So the first one, you enjoy the last minute uh, adrenaline rush and tell yourself you work best under pressure. So this type, we call this crisis maker. And the fifth type, you label against external deadlines and expectations. We call this type defier. And the last type, there are too many or too much on your plate because you can't say no or set appropriate boundaries. So for the last type, we call this type of procrastinator overdoer. Okay, so from this type of activity, we can see that there are many different reasons that may cause like procrastination, regardless your procrastination style. You can increase your motivation to complete an academic task to be like that can be helpful approach for you to overcoming any reasons of procrastinating. And we're gonna have like corresponding strategies for you in the very end of the workshop. Okay, we're gonna jump into the next parts.
All right. Okay. So now in part two, we're going to look at those motivational strategies and look at how motivation influences our actions and our behaviors. All right. So looking at here are some perceptions when we are looking at our assignments or projects. Here are some perception of that task that can cause us to procrastinate. So it's helpful to recognize these behaviors or perception of these tasks because it basically motivates us to do the task. I'm sure, as we all know, without motivation, it's very hard to start or complete the task. So folks in the chat were saying, starting a task is very hard, and that is a lot to do with the motivation. And so it's not surprising, we tend to procrastinate on tasks that we find boring or difficult. It makes the task appear unattainable and it's not worth our effort. In addition to thinking, the project, your assignment is boring, if we find the task to be frustrating or stressful or unstructured or unmeaningful, we're more likely to procrastinate on that. So this slide really just lays out some very specific perceptions that we might have of our assignments or projects when we're working on them before we even get started. So that first one, if we're not confident in our capabilities to carry out the task, we're likely to delay starting or completing the task because we don't want to fail at it. So folks, some identified as being a perfectionist, right? That really ties into that self-efficacy perception of the task. The personal utility of the task. If we don't find it important to you, you don't value it, you don't see the relevance, again, that's going to push us to want to have those procrastinating behaviors. Intrinsic value, if you don't find it interesting to engage in the task. Goal achievement, if it's not important to you to do well on the task, again, ties back into that relevance possibly. Goal achievement, if doing well on the task is not important, again, we'll push it off, we'll delay it. And the last one here, task autonomy, when we have or we feel like we have limited control over organizing or scheduling how we complete the task, that's another, motivation or something that demotivates us really and not want us to take action, go through with the task. So again, when we look at a task before we even get started, we evaluate the cost of engaging in that task. We think about how much time we need to put in to accomplish the task, what's the emotional cost of completing the task. The potential emotional cost might be disappointment if we feel like we're not achieving a goal we're setting for ourselves. And the last one about, if we decide to engage in the task, that means we can't do something else. You study for your math test, you're not studying for your chemistry tests, right, at the same time. So we're going to look at next how these behaviors can sometimes cause us to get into a bit of a procrastination loop. In the chat, someone mentioned that once you start procrastinating, you feel like you have trouble planning when you're going to do the task, getting started to doing the task, and finishing the task. And then we end up looping ourselves. And why is that? And so procrastination often is described as a negative motivational feedback loop because when we're faced with a task that's harder than we originally thought, or maybe something we have little control over, that pushes us to want to delay or complete the task. Once we delay the task, we might not have time to complete it to the degree that we want. And so we're likely to be disappointed with the outcome of the task. With that disappointment, that leads us to doubt our self-efficacy. Can I really do this? Do I have the competency to do this assignment well? And then that pushes us to think about, okay, the next time I have this assignment again, another reading assignment, am I going to do poorly on it? Or am I going to be disappointed with the results that I have? And with that anticipation, that encourages us to think of, okay, ways, how can we avoid these future tasks? How can we avoid failure? Which means we're going to get into that procrastination loop of now wanting to delay starting another reading assignment, for example. But there's not all hope is lost. We can break out of this negative feedback loop at any point. Some strategies might be using persistence, for example, self-talk, saying that we can keep trying, you'll get it. Or alternatively, what can we consider doing differently? Maybe a different strategy to complete the task. Instead of trying to read 10 pages all in one sitting, maybe this time I just go through the key words, the key formulas, and focus on specific areas of the reading. All right, just going to quickly look at the chat. Okay. Yeah, so folks looking at the different procrastination styles they have come across, and you'll see that regardless of the procrastination styles that you have, these motivational strategies will apply. So another way to encourage motivation is to look at our how we see ourselves as a learner. We call this a learning identity. And so sometimes when we look at a task and right away we're calling it difficult, it's impossible to achieve. It's so challenging for me. That makes us not be encouraged or decreases our motivation to even want to attempt the work. But instead, if our learning identity, we consider that difficult task as an important task to your success. I'm here to learn. If a task is challenging, it means I'm learning something important by completing the task. If we tell ourselves that, we give ourselves that kind of messaging, that'll motivate us to attempt the task and try different strategies. And with the previous slide, we saw how language we use to describe ourselves or the situation really affects our motivation and ultimately our behaviors. Another similar strategy is to create language cues that can encourage our behavior to be aligned with our identity. So for example, a noun wording. So instead of calling yourself a math or science or English student, that will motivate you to act or take on behaviors to carry through with being a math or English or science student, instead of just simply saying you're taking a science or math or English course. We've seen this in research studies. One study looked at voters and calling somebody a voter, asking them how much they care about being a voter versus how much they care about voting. And individuals who heard that were asked how much they care about being a voter actually voted more in the election. And so using that noun wording, calling yourself a science student, a math student, English student, and seeing the coursework as part of your learning process and not just extra work really can help motivate you to complete those assignments to help you become that math or science or English student. And of course, your opinion of the coursework matters. This is another strategy you can consider to keep your motivation when you face stressful periods during the term. And so this can look like identifying the self-reliance or your self-relevance of the course or the coursework to help you stay engaged. So for example, some strategies you might consider would be visualizing the connections between the self-relevance, your self-relevance, and the course. So for a course that you've thought was most challenging, think back to the beginning of the term and create a board, either digital or physical, and brainstorm ways this course will be relevant for you in your future, your career goals, your educational goals. And seeing those connections can again help you build motivation for that course, even if it is challenging for you. The second strategy is to list the most relevant course concepts or theories. So again, choose a course and identify the top 10 concepts or theories from that course that will be relevant to you beyond that course. Maybe this is a prerequisite for another course. How might these current course concepts help you with future courses? And the last strategy is to find out what matters to the presenter. So after your instructor presents a concept or an issue, you can ask them how they found that specific content useful or the concept personally meaningful. Again, just pulling from others' motivation to motivate you in that course. So again, it's very normal to go through periods of high and low motivation when we're completing assignments. Maybe we're really pumped at the beginning to get started, and then we have difficulties carrying through and just completing the assignment. Some strategies here we talked about in terms of your learning identity and thinking of the self-relevance to the course material can help you maintain that motivation. And so we're going to jump into the last section here, focusing on a specific prioritization strategy that can help you evaluate your values and needs to sort any tasks that you need to complete, whether they're academic or your life tasks. And again, building that motivation based on your values and needs to help you carry through and finish those tasks. All right, so again, we're going to go back to the chat here. If we can get your response to this question, what do you do when you procrastinate? So it could be a one-word answer, it could be a sentence. Don't hit enter yet. We're going to give you a minute to think about when you tend to procrastinate on academic tasks, what is it that you're doing? So take a minute now and think about it. And then we're going to come back to the chat and see what folks say. All right, hit enter. Let's see what cleaning, organizing. Yeah, absolutely. I relate to that. My desk is very clean. Right before the presentation here, my office desk is like, yeah, immaculate right now. Doom scrolling, yes. And the technology is great. A lot of the platforms don't have an end page, right? End of page. You just keep going. And so if you want to keep going, it's there available for you for sure. Cleaning, gaming, doing something else productive. Something, okay. Yeah, we're going to come back to that too. Any other activities that folks like to? Too much researching? Okay, yeah, absolutely. That's one part of the academic task, and then there's the bigger academic task that you want to get to. All right, so thinking of I will do something else which is more productive than wasting time on social media and video games. Okay, absolutely. Just thinking about all the other activities that your time could be spent on. So this is another common one, getting something to eat or drink. So I know this happens to me. I work in an office where we have a Tim Hortons downstairs. And throughout the presentation, as I was putting it together, very tempted, and colleagues would come by, hey, we're gonna go grab coffee, you wanna join us? Just walking around, getting something to drink, whether that's at home or at school. And so the idea is that these activities aren't necessarily bad for you, right? Cleaning your house, cleaning your space, even taking a break, using social media. It's not bad for you. These non-academic tasks still contribute to your overall well-being. We're not saying that all you should be doing is focusing on your academic tasks for 24 hours a day. But the idea is determining the appropriate time for completing these tasks. And that's key to staying on track and avoiding procrastinating behaviors. So the strategy that we're going to look at is going to help us hopefully prioritize some of our academic and non-academic tasks, life tasks, if you will, in a way that can use our time effectively and complete those tasks that best align with our goals and needs. And so this is called a priority matrix. You might be familiar with it. It's also known as an Eisenhower matrix, popularized by the US president. But this book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey, goes into a lot of detail about how you can use this as a time management strategy. So for today, we're just going to consider this as a way to encourage you and motivate us to sort our tasks and become manageable. So we're focusing on not, doing everything that we have on our to-do list is urgent and we have to do it right away. So I'm going to break down the matrix a little bit. So it's basically dividing your tasks into 4 quadrants by evaluating the timeliness of it. Is it urgent? You need to do right away, or is it not urgent? There's some time you can schedule it. And at the same time, that task you're wanting to do, how important is it to you? Is it essential that you need to do, or is it not essential, but you want to do it? And so for the first quadrant, actually, sorry, one step back. Before we use the priority matrix, that very first step is to even identify the tasks that you feel you need to be accomplishing. So this is separate from the matrix. A to-do list, quickly jot down maybe for the week. What is it that you want to accomplish for the week? The second step, this is the harder step, is now actually sorting the to-do list into this priority matrix to help you figure out when you should be completing those tasks and how you might schedule it for throughout the week. So again, for the first quadrant, it's an urgent and it's essential task. So the idea is that it's your top priority. These might be deadline-driven projects, an upcoming exam, something you have to submit, an assignment. So it's important to schedule these into your daily or weekly calendar so you get those done quickly. We often default everything feels like it needs to go into quadrant 1. But if we're spending all our time doing tasks in this quadrant, we're going to feel burnt out really quickly. So hopefully, when you go through these quadrants 2, 3, and 4, you'll get a sense of how your tasks might be in these quadrants, and it's okay to delay, completing some of those tasks, but you schedule them into your calendar. Second quadrant, it's not urgent, but it's essential. So these are tied to our long-term goals. So maybe if you have a group project, you're breaking it into smaller chunks. Someone talked about research, and maybe, part of that is in quadrant 2, but scheduling, a meeting for your group could also be in quadrant 2, but that deadline, if let's say your project is due, tomorrow and you didn't have a chance to complete it yet, that deadline is something to, finish right away. Quadrant 3 is urgent and not essential. So the idea for this is there's a timeline for these, but you have potential to move it. So for example, if you might be attending an office hour, you could email the instructor or your TA to see if you could reschedule that meeting. You still want to get ahead of it. So before your final exams, for example, you have your questions clarified. The fourth quadrant is not urgent and not essential. You might look at this and you think, why are these tasks even in my priority matrix? And that's an excellent question to ask yourself. These tasks might be associated with, for example, leisure activities like hiking, but it might also be learning a new skill that you think might help with an interview that you might have coming up. Because again, you don't want to lose sight what's in here. And the idea is if you put tasks in this quadrant, when you revisit your priority matrix, can you move those tasks into quadrants 2 or 3? If you can't move them up or you don't see the value of moving them to quadrants 2 or 3, then maybe that task doesn't belong on your list in the first place. And so again, we're going to look at some questions to consider to ask yourself to help you use that priority matrix more effectively. So the very first question is, where am I spending most of my time? So again, spending your time on the high priority tasks in that quadrant 1 is essential because you're getting your work done. But hopefully you're spending a lot of your time in quadrant 2 as well, because again, these are tied to your long-term goals. And so this is, important to put time in as well. So you're not just constantly putting out fires if you're just focusing on your tasks from task 1. The second question to ask yourself, is the task important to me or to other people? And so the idea is if the task allows you to gain new knowledge or experiences that are related to your area of study or your field, that's important to you, right? It might be living in quadrant 2, but that's still essential. But is it a task that helps someone achieve their goals? And while it's great that we can help folks achieve their goals by helping them out, it might not be that high on our priority list, right? It might be a quadrant 3 or quadrant 4 task. And the last question is the task in the right spot? So again, asking yourself those hard questions. What's the time urgency? What's the importance of that task? And again, remembering that priority list is really a living document. Every week, every 2 weeks, go back to that list. Are tasks in the right spot? Do tasks live on the list where it shouldn't be? Do you need to add new items to your list? So evolve that as you go through the term, and that'll make the strategy more effective for you. And we're going to wrap up this section on the priority matrix by going into a poll activity on Zoom, just to think about how we might prioritize some of our tasks. So I'm going to launch this here. Again, you'll see on the screen the 4 quadrants, whether it is urgent or essential. Take a look at those tasks and where would you put these in your priority matrix? Give folks some time to answer this question.
I don't know how everybody can respond to this question, but it doesn't seem like there's option for me to pull something into the table. Oh, I see some responses. Sorry about that. Yeah, it's weird for me on my end.
Okay, maybe we'll give folks 1 more minute to try it out, and then I'll end the poll and share where folks. Okay, so okay, well, thanks for the couple of folks who tried the poll out with us. And so what it looks like right now, we have consensus. Browsing the internet for most folks is really a quadrant 3, something that is, I'm gonna go back to the quadrant on my slide here. Not essential, but urgent. Okay. We have read or write emails again. Yeah, so a little bit of it depends on urgent or how important it is. If you're maybe submitting an application, maybe it's more urgent. If it's just replying to routine emails, is less urgent. So again, there's no right or wrong answer to where folks might put tasks in their priority matrix. Again, it's all coming back to those values and our needs, and the idea of this is why this priority matrix can be a motivator, right? So you see how these tasks are related to your goals, and prioritizing it in a way that allows you to get it done provides you that sense of accomplishment or self-efficacy if it's learning something, and to encourage you to carry through with that task. Okay. Any questions really quickly about the priority matrix before we move on to the next part of this talk? Okay. All right. Then I'm going to pass it back to Min for this last part here.
Okay, yes. So in part one, we kind of let you to choose from all of those six types of procrastinators. And it seems like you probably have some overlapping with each type, and that's quite understandable given that there may be multiple reasons or multiple situations that you might procrastinate. So in this slide, we're going to talk about, the different reasons for procrastination and also the styles as well, and also take a look at like how we can overcome those procrastination styles. So the first one, perfectionists. So for those people who feel like you're always concerned about not meeting the high expectations, feel fearful about making mistakes, it works so hard, but you never finish. Like for those type of people, our strategy is trust that what you already know and also to identify the specific strategies to help to complete this task. And also for the second type, the dreamers, for those people who feel like I always enjoy the ideas, but kind of find a struggle to start work on it or struggle with execution. So our strategy is, create some concrete steps instead of, just dreaming and also spend some time regularly to complete each steps or each plan of your task. For the next type, the warrior, which is like the what ifs giving away. So you kind of feel fearful about fearful about failure or criticism from other people. You kind of avoid making the decision, resist change, and also fearful about, other unfamiliar situations maybe. So the suggestion maybe is, to break the bigger project into smaller pieces so that it became more manageable, and then you can start with some small tasks instead of just thinking about the big task. And the next one, the crisis maker, for those people who feel like I always enjoy the last minutes of the deadline, and I would love to work under that type of pressure. Yeah, I see in the comment that like in the chat that I always hear warrior as their warrior as a warrior. Okay. Uh, yeah, so the next one, like the crisis maker, like you enjoy the last minutes and I feel like you can always work better under the pressure. So for those who feel like you probably fall into this category, we probably can set an earlier deadline instead of, like for example, my previous deadline probably is on Friday, so I can move the deadline a couple of days ahead so that you can always start slightly a bit earlier then. And for the fire, you label kind of against external deadlines and resent external demands as well or expectations. So you might be overt about this, or you might exhibit a bit of a more passive, aggressive kind of defiance. So you might consider to set aside time to do the things that you really enjoy, and also choose to act and consider the outcomes or consequences of completing the task. And such as like connect the task values when you consider about completing the task. And the other last type is overdoer. So there's so much like on your plates, like you can't really decide which one to do probably. So like our suggestion is always, say no, may consider like whether this is urgent, whether this is necessary to do so. So learn to say no and also prioritize and decide what tasks should be taken care of. Okay, so our next slide, like remember we talked to our students in terms of their procrastinations like experience, and they also provided with us some additional, kind of insights and also strategies in terms of how they can come over with procrastination. So some students say like scheduling breaks. For example, start early and remind myself that I'll thank myself in the future if I plan my time ahead. And I try to take some breaks to allow myself to absorb the content easier and also practice self-care. And another strategy from the student is to break down large tasks so that you can, have those smaller and manageable tasks in hand. So break up a big, difficult task into pieces and makes a big task look less stressful and allows me to actually feel productive. I keep track of those smaller tasks in an agenda and check things off as I go. So again, those are the strategies from our students. So I hope you find them practical and useful. So we're using this slide to kind of wrapping up, and we're gonna, use kind of like a poll, but we're not using the same poll. But again, if you can take a look at those three statements and see which statement about procrastination is false. And yeah, I'm gonna give you a minute to read through those three statements. Okay, so if you finish reading them, I will ask you to, type into the chat window and in terms of the number that you feel is false. Okay, I see like one respond saying that number two is false. Two is definitely false. Otherwise, I would be a scholar now. Yeah, so that's true. So the first statement, active delaying the start of a task is not the same as procrastinating on it. So this one is quite obvious. So active delaying differs from procrastination. So like each of us might intentionally, like at some point, like delay or postpone a task, but we can complete it within the deadline and are like if we can might feel like satisfied with the result, then that's like kind of the active delaying. So which is quite different from the typical procrastination. And the second one, procrastination can help you in like achieve your academic goals in certain situations. And obviously this one is not correct because procrastinating on tasks is like irrational and leads to it can be irrational and also lead to poor academic performance because like it involves for like self-regulatory processes. And the last one, your perception of the task can cause you to procrastinate on it. And this one is true, depending on how we view the task, whether we view it as important or like impossible or challenging task, right? So if the task is not important for you, then you probably don't find it quite interesting or useful. And then there is a big chance that you might procrastinate on either starting or finishing it. And so those are the answers. And eventually we wanted to present on you, like we want to wrap it up by saying like motivational strategies can help you to overcome procrastination. And those are the three main points. The first one is develop a learning identity, viewing the difficult tasks as important tasks, not impossible tasks. So that we can, also on the other hand, we can also adopt the language of like use the nouns instead of the verbs, such as I'm a science student, I'm an English student, instead of I'm learning science or I'm just taking the science course. The second one is establish self-relevance to coursework. This can help you to see the utility or relevance of your coursework or the content that's related to your goal, your value as a student. The last one, effectively use a priority matrix. So we can use this one to kind of identify whether the task is urgent, is necessary, and how we can prioritize like different tasks so that we can use this to when we decide to complete some certain tasks and decide whether the aligns with our goals, values, and needs so that we can use all of those strategies to, feeling hopefully you can feel confident to say that, yeah, we can do it and we can overcome procrastination by prioritizing what matters to you. Okay, so that's the end of our content. We have our reference list in the last couple of slices, and we left a couple of minutes for questions.
All right, and also want to thank everyone for joining us for our session today. Just before we close out, if folks can type into the chat and maybe in one word, how do you feel now? Now that we've reached the end, we looked at some motivational strategies. So far, so good. Okay, that's great to hear. And thank you again for participating, everyone, and sharing your thoughts. If you have any questions or comments about using any of the strategies, maybe you've tried these strategies, we're interested to hear how it's worked out for you in the past, or maybe do you see any difficulties with any of these motivational strategies that we're suggesting? Happy to take any questions. Feel free to unmute your mic if you want to ask a question that way, or in the chat is great as well. Motivated, great. Yeah, thanks, Ben, for joining us. Where are we able to find the PPT? So we have a copy of the slides as a PDF form in the session lobby. Yeah, thanks you, Lisa, for joining us. Oh, I should share a last slide. We have our email as well here in the, you can find it in the PDF, but feel free if questions come to you after the workshop or after this week at PAW, feel free to email Min or myself at this email here, ssolearn@uwaterloo.ca. And we're happy to chat that way as well. All right, yes. Okay, thank you, Sarah. Okay, so we're gonna wrap things up and end our chat and our session. Okay, thanks, Mary.
Right. Enjoy the rest of the sessions.